and I was wide awake, as I say. And the blankets were kind of, half over my head, and I could see the grand piano and stuff, the baby grand piano. Between me and the grand piano, there was something standing there, a humanoid figure. It was about 3-4 foot tall. It was dressed head to foot in green. It was like a green jumpsuit thing it had on, tight fitting. And round its waist, it wore was a belt, but I'm saying a belt. It looked like a buckle, but it wasn't a buckle. It was more machine-like. It was like a device around its waist, and it was watching me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't frightened because it wasn't offering any threat. It had his arms folded, and it was just watching me.
Well, as a result of a very early close encounter with the other world, Brian Allan has had a lifelong experience in all kinds of paranormal and occult phenomena. He's produced 14 books, the latest being the Book of Secrets, and he's about to join us and talk about that book right now. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Dean. How you doing?
I'm really good. This is a great book. I've gone through it. Some of the topics in there really meaty. I'm sure people who buy it are going to enjoy it. But first of all, we'll look at some of the topics in the book in a moment. But I just wanted to ask you firstly, because you've been involved in this business for a long time. What actually got you interested in the paranormal?
Well, this goes back to 19. I'm quite an old guy. So this goes back to about 1946, 1947. About then. I was 3 years old, 2.5, 3 years old. I was still in a cot. That's how young I was. I was still lying in a cot, slept in a cot. And in the room, I could actually see my father's baby. He had a baby grand. My father was a musician. And in the bedroom, we had a baby grand piano. So it was quite a big instrument, quite a big room, actually, that happens. But I was laying in my cot. It was a summer's morning, and the sun was streaming in the window right across the bottom of the cot. And I'd woken up. And like I say, I was 2.5, 3 years old, and this image is branded in my brain like it happened yesterday. I swear to God, this is so bright, and I can even smell. it. It's so clear. Well, I was lying on my left-hand side. I was looking through the spars of the cot towards my father's baby grand piano, and I was wide awake, as I say. And the blankets were kind of half over my head, and I could see the grand piano and stuff, the baby grand piano. Between me and the grand piano, there was something standing there, a humanoid figure. It was about 3-4 foot tall. It was dressed head to foot in green. It was like a green jumpsuit thing it had on, tight fitting. And round its waist, it wore was a belt, but I'm saying a belt. It looked like a buckle, but it wasn't a buckle. It was more machine-like. It was like a device around its waist, and it was watching me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't frightened because it wasn't offering any threat. It had his arms folded, and it was just watching me. And I'm looking back at it. It's looking at me, and because it offered, I like closed my eyes, yeah, it was still there. This wasn't a hallucination. I was seeing this. This was real. This was there. And at the time, I thought, within the next 10, 15 years, I thought, oh, that was a fairy. That was a supernatural creature that I saw. Anyway, it just vanished. How can I put this? I mean, it's hard to revisit this sometimes. I opened and closed my eyes several times. It was still there. Then I said it wasn't giving me a threat, so I went back to sleep. Simple as that. And when I woke up, it had gone. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I guess when I started thinking about this when I was 10, 12 years old, I assumed it was some sort of supernatural thing. Then I realized that a couple of months later, in the same bedroom, I had a lucid dream. But that was before I even knew what a lucid dream actually was, or long before. But it was a UFO, okay, your typical disc-shaped UFO, and this was realer than real. And I knew this had come for me. It was for me. That I was meant to see this. And then I realized the two were connected. So I think I had been selected at that age by them for some purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And from then on, I've had a keen, avid interest in the occult and the paranormal and ufology. And to be honest, I don't see any difference between any of them because they're all interconnected. Absolutely are.
Well, you've certainly as I say, you spent a lifetime studying the paranormal, and it's led you to produce a great magazine called the Phenomena magazine.
Yeah, Phenomena magazine. Yeah.
Yeah. How long have you been writing that?
Well, I don't write it. I edit it.
Mm-hmm.
It actually belongs to a guy called Steve Mera, Mera, Steve Mera. If anyone wants to Google Steve, he's a really good character, a good guy, and he's been around this field a long time. But Steve started it up about 10, 11 years ago. Now, at the time, I was editing a newsstand magazine called Paranormal. But the recession hit at the time, and it just got stopped. The guy that owned it said it was too expensive to run, and he just shut it down. Now, Steve got to hear about it. He knew that I was an editor, and he gave me a shout. Would I like to sub-edit the magazine, Phenomena? And I said, yeah, why not? That's fine with me. So I started sub-editing it with him mainly because it gave me something to do, and it kept me focused on a subject that I love. And then Steve saw how I knew what I was doing. Says, look, he said, I haven't really got the time for this. I said, will you just do the editing and take it at that? And I said, yeah, sure. And that was 10 years ago, and I'm still editing it yet, putting out an issue a month and stuff. So yeah, I'm still very much tied up with it. I sometimes write articles for the magazine, but I never do it under my own name. I use a whole variety. I make up the pseudonym on the spot, sort of thing. That'll do. Yeah, we'll write under that pseudonym, because I don't have that massive an ego that I need to see my name splashed up in the magazine constantly. But there's one that I use that's it's an almost anagram of Grover's Mill, which was where the Martians landed, if you recall. Do you remember? Yeah, okay. And I call myself Milton Grover, and it's an almost anagram of Grover's Mill, so I thought that just about fitted. So there you go.
Okay.
But I don't write all that much stuff. I've got too much to do. I have too many other things, too many irons in the fire, books to write, stuff, so I do that.
Mm-hmm. So you had an experience at a young age. I had a strange experience at a very young age when I was about 5. And I just chuckle every time I hear a skeptic come out and talk about the paranormal, and that it's it's BS and all that stuff. What do you say to those skeptics who have the idea that the paranormal events that people have are not real?
Well, I welcome it, because I've obviously done a lot of research into the subject and come to a balanced opinion, and that must be it. But because they've, I'm being ironic here. You should understand that. These people that instinctively say it is BS, I pity them, because they obviously haven't looked at the evidence, they haven't weighed it up, and if they are, I think they're frightened of what they're going to see if they admit that it's real.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, I know that it's real. I just know it is, because, like I say, I used to do ghost busting when I took an interest in that sort of thing. I've seen stuff, I've seen poltergeist activity, seen that kind of stuff. I've interacted with things that weren't there, that they've interacted with me, seen it repeatedly. But you get to the point is when you go out in these cases and you're sort of helping people to overcome stuff that's in their house, maybe apparitions, you name it, all sorts of stuff. But you get to a point where it's same old, same old. And I realized I wasn't learning anything new. I was just rekindling the fire. I helped people when I could, and usually with some degree of success. But I just stopped doing it after a while, because it was just I said I just had enough, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Book of Secrets. What prompted you to write it?
Oh well, in many ways, it shares some similarities with the very first book I wrote, which was The View from the Abyss, which is out of print now, I might add. But it was just a collection of stuff I had that I've written over the years. And Book of Secrets, I realised when I looked at this material, I thought, I can put all this together and make it thematic. And a lot of it is Book of Secrets, because there's a lot of stuff in here that you're going from the Vimanas of ancient India up to the secrets of the Vatican archive, and all sorts of stuff like that. And it just all fits together. And my current publisher is Flying Disc Press, which is owned by Philip Mantle. Philip bit my hand off to get a hold of it, so I said, "Oh well, if that's the case, have it." Yep. But it's just a book of stuff that I've had lying around for ages. And I said, when I looked at it, I realised it was all thematic. And I just ran with it and we printed it out there because it contains some good information. I've been quite pleased to come by it. Some of it I wasn't too sure of, then I researched it harder, then I realised, yeah, it is true. So yeah, I think that's worth putting into book form, yeah.
Yeah. Well, when we look at the umbrella explanation of paranormal, I guess a lot of people will look at different aspects of the paranormal where they'll concentrate on UFOs or ghosts or another aspect of it. But there's been a lot of research done. I know Jacques Vallée describes the interdimensional hypothesis in his book Dimensions, and
sure.
another researcher I've spoken with has done a lot of research on this. Ray Hernandez says that his research shows that all paranormal events are interrelated in some way.
Absolutely.
Is this what you've found?
Oh, 100%. Once you start looking into it, it's like a spider's web, and it just shoots it all over the place. How can I give you an example of this? I mean, yeah. The first chapter of the book, which is the Vimana anti-gravity enigma. Now, Vimanas, as you know, were the flying machines, the fighting machines, if you like, described in works like the Mahabharata, you know, ancient Indian works, manuscripts. And one thing I did find, and it was surprising, that the power source of the Vimana was some sort of mercury engine. Yeah. And I suddenly realized that the Glock of the bell, the Nazi bell, it also used mercury or some sort of mercury type, you know, power source to power it. So there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, you've got all this stuff, but although with the Glocke, I tend to get a bit exasperated with that because even if it did exist, there's no sign of it now, and nobody actually knows what became of it. Whether it got bundled away along with Hans Kammler, who was one of the people that helped design, or he was a guy that orchestrated the whole project, the part of the project, and the whole thing that vanished after the Second World War. It may have come under Project Paperclip. It could have gone anywhere, but the Glocke, I think, was not a time machine. I don't think it was a power source either. What I think it was a plasma centrifuge that was part of the Nazi atomic bomb program during the Second World War. That's what I think it was. I mean, if anybody can correct me on that, I'm quite happy. I'll hold my hands up. Yeah, if you can prove it's different, I'll accept your word. But in the meantime, I think it was a plasma centrifuge.
Wow. So with all the research being done on the paranormal, I guess we're getting closer and closer to solving a lot of mysteries about our existence here on this planet. And I think one I'd love to see solved is the meaning of life. Could something like that be explained once we understand what's going on?
I think Monty Python's Flying Circus did something like that a number of years ago. Very humorous it was too. The meaning of life. You start going down a whole bunch of different roads once you get into the subject, because you start to bring in religion, okay? And religion is such a touchy subject for an awful lot of people. Not for me, because, well, I better watch what I'm saying here, but I've as far as religion is concerned, if people want to believe there's a God, there is one, and there isn't up for argument, simple as that. I tend to think if there is a God, then it's certainly not all-powerful. Certainly not. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the mess that we're in, quite frankly. We wouldn't have people getting murdered in the streets. We wouldn't have children getting raped. We wouldn't have all sorts of BS going on in the world today. What's happening in Ukraine is a prime example. We've seen it time and time again with World War. So if there is a God, he's certainly not all-powerful. And if he is, he's certainly got a very warped sense of what is right and what is wrong when he allows that sort of thing to happen. Because we tend to put a gender to God. We talk about he, him, you know, when such a being has no gender. It just exists. It's neither male nor female. It's a consciousness, if you like to put it that way. But I don't think people tend to associate God with looking like Zeus with long hair sitting on a throne. They tend to get this mental image, and I think that's been largely encouraged by various factions and faiths. But if there is a God, it's a consciousness, a universal consciousness. I think that's the best way of putting it. But ascribing it as being all powerful, no, it's not. I don't believe.
Yeah, and to that, I mean, near-death experiences, for example, you know, when they cross over and they describe they describe the all-powerful being in front of them. You know, often it's described as looking like a man, you know, with the long hair. And do you think that's just part of what they've learned through their own religion?
It's almost like an archetype, is the best way of putting it. Yes, I think it is what religion teaches, what the other side will look like. Although my wife was a nurse. Well, she's retired now, but she was a nurse. And she's seen things in the hospital ward on night shifts. You start saying, whoa, what was that all about? She's seen people on the point of death. You know, she knew they were dying. And there was she was with a colleague, you know, and they were sitting chatting, and they looked up the ward, and these people walked in the door, the ward, stood round about this bed, and the person in the bed started talking, speaking to them. Then the people just disappeared, and the person died. So they saw that.
Wow.
So, you know, what do you say? I don't know. But was that an NDE? Was this an example of your relations coming to take you when your spirit is leaving the body? I don't know. But I go quite cold talking about that, because it's one of these strange experiences that people have that they've recounted to you, and all you can do is take it at face value as to what it actually means. But I think in hospitals there's a lot of this stuff goes on. I mean, I've spoken to doctors talking off the record what they make of it all, and the ones that will talk to you, and not all of them will talk to you about this sort of thing, because it's strained kind of far into the outer limits of what they know about the body, about the way the body functions. Some doctors will say that they've had very strange experiences with people who are dying. The you know, things appearing in the room with them, all sorts of stuff. Now, a friend of mine died a couple of years ago. He died in a hospice. And he used to talk about the people that came to see him in the night in this hospice. And the guy, a lovely guy, genuine guy, but I thought the absolute world of the guy. And when he died, he knew that people would be there to come with him and help him on his way. And I believe that if he thinks that's what happened, then that's what happened. I fully believe that's the case, because his son, who I got to know quite well, he told me the same sort of tale, that this is what his dad was telling him, and he was quite prepared to go with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've listened and been spoken to by a lot of nurses that have worked in hospitals, and they talk about what you've just described.
Sure,
and
sure.
you know, one of the authorities I think we refer to them as pre-death experiences. Peter Fenwick has done a lot of research in this area.
Yeah.
And it's just quite amazing. And a lot of hospice nurses actually won't talk about it because you know, I'm not sure why, but those that do, I mean, the hair on the back of your necks will stand up when they're actually describing what they've seen. Speaking of God, let's look at some of the topics in the book. And one of the questions in the book is, did our race originate as part of an alien agenda?
Possibly, yes. But it's only possible. I know I've written about it, but I think it's highly likely, because the chances of DNA or the constituent elements of DNA by chance assembling in a small warm pool, which seems to be the general consensus of opinion about this sort of thing. I mean, the numbers again are beyond astronomical. So I think that we are the end result of a project with no clear end in sight. That I think this is why people still have contact with ET. I think abductions perhaps occur for much the same reason, that they're monitoring their experiment and just trying to see what happens. But as to what the end output, as to what they're looking for, I don't know. I'm not pretending that I do. But we didn't start for nothing. We were spawned. We were deliberately created, and God's got nothing to do with it. That our God, if you want to put it that way, is an extraterrestrial, which I suppose by inference it is, you know, extraterrestrial. Yeah. But I think we are the end result of a genetic experiment by an extraterrestrial race for entirely their own reasons. Maybe it's just to see what happens. Who knows?
Yeah. Has it been encouraging over the last 10 to 20 years with the number of people who have come forward and spoken about their contact experiences?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a few myself, and yet the people genuinely 100% believe this happened. I mean, I've spoken to abductees. That there was the A70 abduction case, which isn't in here; it's in another of my books. But there's a road called the A70 here in Scotland, not far from Edinburgh, and these guys were taken and quite well, yeah. And what happened to them was quite surprising. I'm not going to the chapter and verse here because we just don't have time. It's simple as that. But the guys themselves are 100% certain that this happened to them. I've interviewed one of them 3 times, 3 separate times, and his tale has never changed. It's never been elaborated on. It's never been enhanced in any way. He tells the same story every single time, that these guys were taken and they were examined and everything that goes with it, and they saw other people in the craft and all the rest of it. But even they didn't come to any fixed conclusion about this. But they felt they were being evaluated to see how far. Perhaps it's the ETs just checking it on how we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think maybe we're a social experiment as well, just to see what we'll do if we're left alone. And if that's the result, we haven't made a very good job of it, because let's face it, we've raped the planet. We're destroying the planet, we're destroying each other, and we still fight each other for what? There's no good reason for it, other than territory, I guess, or wealth or riches or something. But I'm not going to philosophize in this, otherwise we could be talking all night, you know.
Yeah. Brian, you know, in the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen a group emerge that are called the CE5 movement.
Yeah.
Have you had much to do with that? And if you had, have you got an opinion on what they do?
No, I actually, I mean, I've heard the term, but it's not one I've gone into in any depth. I mean, I've heard about the CEs, but the various categories of CE, but not a lot about CE5s. No. How do you define CE5? Then I can take it from there.
Well, you know, close encounter. I guess 5 is up from 3 and 4.
Yeah.
I mean, they do get a lot of criticism within the mainstream, you know, UFO movement, and there seems to be that the two groups tend to be at loggerheads on occasions. You know, a lot of people with religious beliefs believe that they're inviting things in, and but you know, I've spoken with a lot of people involved within CE5, and you know, I think what they're doing is a really good job.
Well, one of the chapters in the book is called Ufology and the Collins Elite, and that touches on what you're talking about. Now, back in the 1950s, now you're talking about the CIA was involved in this, the FBI was involved in it, that people wanted to know, in spite of the furious denials and protestations of government, because they know perfectly well that UFOs are a reality, that there are entities from other realities, other dimensions, call it what you like, they are arriving here, and it's not for nothing. So one of the groups they set up was called the Collins Elite. Now, did this group exist? Well, according to Nick Redfern, they did exist, and they still exist, I might add. Now, they were set up by the various intelligence agencies. They all had an input into this group. It was called the Collins Elite because I think that was the name of one of the guys that was involved. His name was Collins, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they set up this group. But the problem is they had their own agenda. And that's what bothers me about it, because if it existed, their agenda was pretty tight. And the agenda was not so much to find out are UFOs real. Their agenda was to find out who sent them here and what they're doing here. Now, as far as I can make out, some of them, their agenda was a very right-wing Christian outlook on it. That UFOs were not nuts and bolts craft that came from other dimensions or galaxies or whatever. These UFOs were crewed by demons. Okay, you've probably come across it, that this notion, but by some of the very right-wing, you know, ultra traditionalist Christian outfits, that UFOs are crewed by demons. On the other hand, some say they're crewed by angels. I mean, you pays your money, you takes your choice.
Mm-hmm.
But the Collins Elite came out with this agenda, which was that UFOs are not nuts and bolts craft. And I mean, obviously, the chapter itself goes into a lot more detail about this and why they did it. But did do it? Yes, they did, and that was the conclusion they came to. I think they were wildly wrong, but they're entitled to their opinion, I guess. But they were certainly driven by an agenda that wanted, and they wanted that to be the outcome. That these things were demonic or spiritual at any rate. They weren't nuts and bolts machines. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, having said that, what about the behind the scenes disinformation campaign that just?
This is soft drink, by the way.
Oh, okay. I wasn't even thinking anything
No,
other
okay,
than a soft drink.
It is a soft drink, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially since Roswell, the like Stephen Bassett describes it as a truth embargo to discredit the truth. I mean, do you believe something like that is going on? And if so, could it possibly even be ET driven?
It could be. In fact, I've heard it suggested. The author, it's a woman. Her name is just gone, but she wrote a book about Roswell, and she claimed that what was crashed in Roswell came from Russia. And it was part of a campaign organized by the Russians at the time to really throw a spanner into the UFO works, if you want to put it that way. And she claims it was a Russian device that crashed in Roswell. Personally, I don't think so. But the thing is about Roswell, it's become so obfuscated with all sorts of opinions, denials, and claims and counterclaims that you'll never get to the truth of what happened in Roswell. I don't think anybody actually knows now, or I think if they know, they don't particularly care, because there's been so much confusion and chaos created by what allegedly happened. Look, how can I put this? There's been claims made, especially in a book called The Day After Roswell, which was supposed, it was written by Bill Burns, but the information came from Philip Corso. And everything from lasers and fiber optics, blah de blah de blah, all came from Roswell. No, it didn't. What people tend to forget is Philip Corso was in the intelligence community. That's what he did. He was a spook, in other words. He was intelligence based. And it was up to him to deflect attention. And I believe that the stuff that was supposedly developed from what crashed in Roswell, in fact, came from companies like Siemens in Germany, Nazi Germany. There was a lot of stuff being developed, and silicon wafers, for example, came from that. This was getting developed at the time in Nazi Germany. It was all to do with miniaturization of components. That's what it was all to do, so they could build bigger and better ways, or smaller and better ways of killing each other, or killing us, more to the point. So it wouldn't look very good for America to be making vast amounts of money on Nazi technology. So I think part of the program was to shift the blame onto ET, because if they're making it from back engineering stuff from ET, then that was fine, that was well and good. But they certainly couldn't claim the blame or claim the benefits of back engineering Nazi technology. So I tend to think that most of the stuff that allegedly came from Roswell didn't come from Roswell. They were all developed from top end technology that evolved in the Second World War. That's also I believe.
Yeah. Wow. Some other topics you cover in the book. One that I found really interesting is the research that's been done on the Watchers. Do you want to talk a little bit about who they are and what they were?
The Watchers, okay. They've also been called the Fallen Angels. That was another game of Fallen Angels. How can I put this? I still know the guy, and I asked the guy, what was here before the beginning? What was here before, was there a reality before the earth began, before it all came together? And the answer that came back from this entity that used to deal with was there was a lot of fighting. Now, that was the answer that came back. And you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute. There was a lot of fighting, and this brought the hairs up in the back of my neck, because you get the biblical quote of there was a war in heaven, and you get this sort of thing. And after the end of the war, the bad angels, if you like, got horsed out, got sent down to the earth, and they became the Watchers, and they interbred allegedly with human women, and they produced the Nephilim, who were, mighty men, men of renown, and so it goes in the Bible. But the Nephilim, I think, may well have existed, but I don't think they were necessarily the byproduct of fallen angels and human women. I think they may well have been the byproduct of extraterrestrials and women, human women. So that's where they came from. But that is, again, this is touched on in another chapter in the book, which is the secrets of the Vatican archives.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of the stuff that supposedly, now, I've heard it said that the Vatican archives aren't all that secret, if you want to put it that way, and then what is contained in them isn't all that necessarily greatly important. But put it this way, if it's not greatly important, there's about as much chance of you and I getting into the Vatican archives to have a route around as there is for a snowball existing in hell for very long.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are watched from the minute you go in till the minute you come out. Because there's information squirreled away in his archives that would bring the Catholic Church crashing down about its ears. But as far as the sort of run-of-the-mill secrets, if you want to put it that way, they know that there are 7 fragments of bone that are supposed to be the bones of St. Peter, upon whom the Catholic Church basically was founded. And they were, I can't remember when it wasn't all that long ago they were actually found, but I know one of the popes that has prayed over them and blessed them, and have been presented to the public as the bones of St. Peter. That's one of the things that's in there.
Mm-hmm.
The real third secret of Fatima is also in there, because I think, although the first 2 were read out, and I can't remember which pope he said that this is the third secret of Fatima, I don't think it is. Because I think they told people what they wanted to hear, or they wanted them to hear. I think the real third secret of Fatima, which is not a very pleasant outcome for the human race in general, is still secreted away there. I've also, one of the unlikely things I think that are supposedly secreted away with, and don't forget, the Vatican's it's a gigantic, it's the size of, it's a city, for goodness sake. I've been there. But also somewhere squirreled away in the subterranean recesses of the Vatican archive, Satan, the actual Satan is supposed to be there, or some entity that claimed that they claim as Satan is actually secreted away in the archive. Whether you believe that or not is entirely up to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I know is in there, as far as my researchers have learned, grimoires, okay, or books of magic spells, particularly the grimoire of Pope Honorius III, which is supposedly the most evil book ever written, because the idea of why would a man of religion want to gather magic spells in a book? It's because people expected, if the church could summon God, then church could summon the anti-God, the Antichrist, if you want to put it that way. So by assembling these works of evil in the book, then they could gather them all together and understand them and provide a level of protection for people. But as I say, this grimoire of Pope Honorius III is supposed to be the most evil and dangerous book ever produced,
Mm-hmm.
and don't think it's ever been seen by a lay person. Has ever been seen. They know it exists because they know he was known to have written it. But actually, getting access to it is now an impossible, I would say. Other things that are in there is a thing called the chronovisor. That was created by a professor, a Father Emeti, who was also a physicist, a quantum physicist, as far as I know. Now, this chronovisor is, as you might think, chrono time visor view. It's a time viewer that views into the past. Now, oddly enough, I was given a presentation on a similar subject a couple of days ago, and I can't remember the source that was quoted, but this comes from more than one source. That it's claimed that the Vatican possesses some means of looking at the past, of seeing the past, of what actually happened. And this Father Emeti, he apparently was responsible for creating this thing. Although, again, this is one of these things, either you accept it or you don't accept it. Myself would need to see it. If you go online and Google chronovisor, you'll see pictures of this thing,
Mm-hmm.
which looks like a sort of TV set, if you want to put it that way. A fancy TV set with a lot of controls on it. But whether or not it actually exists, goodness only knows. But also, another interesting aspect of the secrets hidden away in the archive is 100% proof of extraterrestrial life. Now, again, whether that's true, I don't know. But again, this is one of the many secrets that's supposedly hidden. There's so much stuff in there, but I think that anybody that gets into the Vatican archive, and I haven't spoken to anyone that's been there, but I've read about them, read about these people, that you are watched from the second you walk in that door to the second you walk out, and it's not like watching on camera. There's somebody standing right beside you to say exactly what you're looking at, and you better be able to justify the reason you're looking for it as well. Otherwise, they just won't show you this stuff. But like I say, I think that the main fear is that there's enough material in there to bring the Catholic Church crashing down and just completely destroy it.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing we do know about the Vatican is they do have a couple of big telescopes that they use to look at the stars, which kind of amazes me.
Well, they would do, because let's face it, there's no reason that just because an organisation is secular, it shouldn't have non-secular interests as well, because for them to know what's happening around about us out in space with the different planets and all the rest of it, I think it's vitally important that they do, because maybe they themselves are going to learn from it. But yeah, there was a time when education was much feared by religion, because it wasn't in their interest. Pardon me, I'm going to cough. Pardon me. It wasn't in their interest for the subjects to be particularly well educated, because the only form of education used to be if you joined the priesthood, you achieved education, but it was a very, very restricted form of education you got in the first place anyway, because it was all very biased towards belief in a God and all the rest of it, and afterlife and so forth. Although, as we touched on at the start, there is an afterlife, but it's nothing to do with God or anything the rest of it. We do pass on, we do pass over, because our consciousness just changes state, I believe, and it becomes something else. But as a matter of interest, with COVID-19, which it's not exactly gone yet, but we've got a handle on it now. But one of the chapters in the book, one of the latter chapters, is called Plague Ghosts. And when I started looking at this, I realised that there's areas all over the world, but the two in particular that I've one, because I've been there and I've actually interfaced with it, is in Edinburgh. The other one is Har Island, which is adjacent to New York. In fact, it was a sort of Potter's Field for New York once upon a time, New York City, and that people who couldn't afford to a funeral, or the people couldn't afford to have them buried, well, obviously the state had to bury them. The county had to bury them, so they were buried on Har Island. And a lot of stuff happened out on that island, but there was a women's mental institution, there was prisons. It was used as a training camp for I really better watch what I'm saying here, but can I just say that some of the battalions in the American Civil War were the non-whites, shall we say, were trained specifically out there. I know this is terrible to say, but it's a fact. This actually happened. We shouldn't be afraid of looking at the past, because a lot of mistakes were made. But they were trained there. There was also a prison for prisoners of the American Civil War. They from the South. They were all transported up there, and they were imprisoned there. But the place isn't used all that often. But and when it is, it's only for burials of indigent people from New York State. And the people that do the burying are usually from Rikers Island, convicts from Rikers Island, which isn't all that far away from it. And they're used as the labour force in many cases to bury the poor people out there. But the ghosts, well, yeah, they're often seen at this former women's mental institution. They're often seen or sensed there. People who are on the island, and there aren't all that many, but when they do visit, nobody wants to be on there on their own, put it that way. Nobody would willingly or knowingly be there on their own, because stuff's seen. And particularly when people have been there and gone home, they seem to have dragged a little bit of it with them, because this has happened to me on a couple of occasions. That when people have been on the island, they tend to have visions of the island as it was when it was still active, with the mental institutions and the prisons and all the rest of it. and they see that, and yeah. So Har Island, it's well worth having a Google and have a look at for any of your listeners that are interested. Har Island.
Yep.
And because a lot of people, and the reason I'm saying about COVID-19, because a lot of the deaths in New York City that were attributable to COVID-19, they were buried on Har Island, and many of them in mass graves, which is a pity, but there it is. It's just a fact of life. Yeah. Now, the other place that the plague ghosts have relevance is in Edinburgh, particularly in the Covenanters prison, which is again, as I say, in Edinburgh. But if they Google Covenanters prison, this will actually let them see what's involved. But it's part of Greyfriars Churchyard in Edinburgh. Greyfriars Bobby, pardon me, the little terrier dog that sits in his little pedestal outside it. But Greyfriars Kirkyard and the Covenanters prison. Now, it's called the Covenanters prison basically because back in the 1800s, when there were a lot of religious wars going on, and the English system of religion was getting impressed upon the Scots, they weren't very impressed by this at all, and they said, we're not going to have it. So they signed this solemn sealing covenant that they were going to press on with their own version of the Protestant religion. And this resulted in many of them being put to death. And before they were put to death, they were all enclosed in this part of Greyfriars called the Covenanters prison. Now, I've been in it. Because it's one of the biggest mass graves on the planet, believe it or not, is this Covenanters, or the whole graveyard in Edinburgh, because it was designed for maybe 5,000 graves, but there was 500,000 people buried there. And what happens is that the bones percolate. I've seen this. I've actually got pictures of it. The bones percolate to the surface, and when the local authorities see this, with due deference and all that, they'll rebury them, with all due ceremony and all the rest. But this happens on a regular basis. So I've seen things happen. I've actually been in the Covenanters prison when this was happening. That I was in there with a couple of mediums once, but we were doing an investigation that people were getting attacked on the ghost tours that use the Covenanters prison as their main event. And I was standing with a Trifield Meter, and one of the mediums said, "Oh, a spirit's just passed us," and the Trifield Meter went vroom, vroom. And I went, "Oh yeah." So that means it picked up a magnetic field. And I thought, maybe it's a transit. Well, and then the medium says, "Oh, here's another one." Zoom, zoom, up and down. So either she was interpreting a chance magnetic field as a spirit, or the spirit was generating its own electromagnetic field as it passed. Because we're all a factor of the electromagnetic spectrum, irrespective of who or what we are. And I think the other world is exactly the same thing, although perhaps it's a more rarefied part of that spectrum. But I'm pretty sure it all exists within a recognized within the electromagnetic field, if you want to put it that way. Yeah.
Yep. Fascinating. Couple more topics that you cover in the book before we close it out here, Brian. Time travel. You cover time travel in the book, and there's a really interesting guy in there by the name of John Titor.
Oh, John Titor, yeah. Now this guy, quite something of a character. Now his device, if you remember the film Back to the Future and the vehicle, I think what was a DeLorean.
DeLorean.
DeLorean, yeah, that all the stuff was built on the back of it. Well, he came up with a similar device, and he was actually showing people pictures of this thing, and he was using this to travel around, travel in time. Now, Titor, he appeared on the internet basically, and he would communicate with people via the internet. Then he disappeared, then he came back again. But Titor claims to have been a genuine, bona fide time traveler. And again, if people, you can read about it in detail in the book, but if anybody just wants a quick look, if Titor is Titor, by the way. So if anyone wants to Google John Titor and see what comes up, but he went the way of all that sort of thing, and he's either traveled in time and gone away again, or he just died out and he got fed up with perpetuating his story and just stopped doing it. But yeah, it's certainly worth a look. Certainly worth a look at. Absolutely. Yeah.
Last topic I thought we could talk about here is Star Children. I've covered a lot on that topic here, especially with people like Mary Rodwell, who's done a lot of research in that area.
Yeah, I've met Mary. Yeah,
but you you devote a chapter to that in the book as well.
What do you think of Star Children? It's a very touchy subject. It's a highly personalised subject. Myself, I think a lot of these kids have got ADHD and a bad dose of it as well. That people want to ascribe all sorts of things to these star children. That if any kid has, if you like, a defect of any kind, a psychological defect, perhaps the parents would rather attribute it to that they're super advanced, that they are indicators of an advanced civilization yet to come, and these are the people that will bring it into being. But that is not necessarily the case. The kids maybe, well, I've spoken to psychologists about this very subject, and it's always seemed to me crazy, when kids had ADHD, of giving them what is in effect speed, giving them amphetamines to try and slow them down when it should have the opposite effect. But is it Ritalin? I think it's called Ritalin, the particular drug in effect. But in effect, it was speed, a formula of speed, and they give it to the kids, and this seems to work. But I don't think it's a good idea to drug kids out of that, out of this sort of thing, because where do you go? I mean, when the Ritalin stops taking effect, you can't keep up the dose and up the dose, which is what usually happens when the body becomes tolerant to it, and you've got to up the dose to make it effective again. But I wrote the piece about the Star Children to make it more complete, shall we say. And I mean, I state my opinions, but the point is, I make my opinions, but I don't just make them and walk away. I make them and I tell people why I've come to that opinion. And if the people want to accept that, well and good. But don't be thinking because I'm saying that I'm a denier and I'm an absolute, I just deny all this kind of. I don't, because I've seen too much. Look, I've had stuff in my house. I've had. Okay, if you've got time, I'll give you this little story, a little tale.
Okay.
It's one of the books I wrote, and the book was about exorcism. And in the course of the book, I had to do a lot of study of the darker side of magic, if you want to put it that way, Satanism, in point of fact. And this always reminded me of a quotation by Nietzsche, is battle not with monsters lest you become a monster. And if you gaze into the abyss gazes also into you. And because I'd been looking into the abyss said, aha, we've seen you. So the abyss paid me a visit. Now, I'd finished this particular chapter in the book, and I hit the full stop key, click. And as soon as I hit that key, that full stop key, I swear to God, in a microsecond, I went bone cold from the inside out. And I went, oh, no, not again, because this sort of thing's happened before. And I realised something was taking a look at me. So that night went to bed as per usual. I didn't tell my wife about this, although she tends to be, when things happen in the house now, she says, what have you been doing? Yeah, really. But anyway, I didn't tell my wife about this, but 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, an appropriate time, obviously. There was a scratching started, a bumping, a thumping, a banging. All around, we could hear things scratching on the walls, inside the walls. We could hear things like furniture get moved up into the bedroom upstairs. And that is the first time in my life I have been paralyzed with fear, because I knew that I had done that. And we lay there, and half an hour later it sort of went, and the house calmed down again. Well, my wife went to work. I cleansed the house. I had to cleanse the house. But that's the second time. I'll give you a quick one on the first time something like this has happened. I'd been in a case in a little village called Doune, Doune, which is in Stirlingshire in Scotland. It was the Highland Hotel. And this place was abundantly haunted. And we'd been there, and I'd taken a couple of mediums because we had to move the spirit on. It was a girl that had fallen down a staircase and died. It turns out this was correct. The mediums found it, and they said this, and we checked, and this had actually happened, and they knew, and they sensed it. And we moved it on. We moved the spirit on, and it was a strange thing because the medium said, you'll feel some stuff happening. Excuse me. A dose of the cold. She said, you'll feel some stuff happening. I was standing on the staircase where the girl had died. And she said, I'm going to send my spirits. I'm going to send my guides to take the what? Our father had made of an abortion. Okay, because she'd got pregnant, and this was back in the 1800s, and you just didn't do that outside marriage. And he'd made her get rid of the kid, and she hated him with a passion.
Mm-hmm.
And when she died in the staircase, she'd had fallen and she'd died in the staircase, she wanted to be reunited with the spirit of the dead baby. Yeah. And when the medium told me that she'd reunited them, I felt it happen. It's a strange sensation, because everything, it was like the house had been, like the hotel had been holding its breath, and it went, ah. And you felt the relaxation just, when she didn't have to tell me she'd been reunited with the dead baby, because I felt it happen. Very, very strange happened. But the thing was that something in that hotel attached itself to me, and it manifested in my home as a stench. And it was a stench that was extremely localized, maybe about a foot across, a foot in circumference, right? And it was like a column. You could walk into it and walk out of it again. And it was located in of all places, in the living room. And I remember my wife she had noticed it, and I'm saying, oh, it'll be the drains, it'll be something. But I knew perfectly well what had happened here. And the strange thing was, my wife was out babysitting that night. This is a number of years ago, when my kids were still young. Well, when my grandkids were still young. And I stood in the kitchen, and I'm looking down at the living room. I said, I won't tell you what I said, because I started to swear a bit. But I asked it to leave, get out of my house, in no uncertain terms, that it knew I wanted out of my house. And it was like a light switch kind of click. It went like that, bang. It just stopped. Because my wife walked in the house. Oh, the smell's gone. Yeah, I said, I opened the doors and windows and stuff. And I didn't tell her what I'd done, but I cleaned the house. And in fact, after the second event, when I cleaned the house, when I said that we heard the noises and all the rest of it, a psychic friend of mine that hadn't been in the house for a while came in, and they were over visiting me. And they said my house was the most psychically neutral house they'd ever been in, because it had been cleansed twice, and I'd really made a good job of it. But yeah, but this stuff is touched on in other books. But the new book, which is a book of secrets, I think your readers, your listeners will enjoy it, because there's such a range of subjects. From what we got, the Nephilim messengers of the gods into the fourth dimension, the Watchers, the Sacred Ark, what is the Ark of the Covenant, Whispers from the Void, Disinformation and the UFO mythos, the Indigo Star Children. That's all covered in different chapters of the book. And as I say, I'm not dismissing any of this. I'm keeping a very, very open mind of it. And I think I can also produce information that they just won't be aware of in some of the chapters.
Yeah, and the book obviously available at outlets like Amazon.
Yeah.
Is it available on Kindle and in audio format?
Yes, it is available in all these formats, as hardback, Kindle, or an audio format as well. Yeah.
Brian, before you go, a previous book you co-wrote with Barry Fitzgerald, who I interviewed not long ago about.
Oh, Barry,
the deception of gods and men. One of the topics in that book really fascinated me. You asked the question of whether the world is an illusion.
Yeah. We start good. I think this was pretty well. I'm trying to name it. There was a series of 3 films. It was the Wachowski brothers who brought them out. The Matrix. Yeah. Are we in a matrix? And how would we know if we were or if we weren't? And how do we know the world is not an illusion and we're not an element of some hard drive someplace? Now, these are subjects that I sometimes think you're better not known to answer to.
Yeah.
I think you just take what you're given and you roll with it, and just hope you can make the best job you can, because, and many times I think learning the truth is a dangerous thing. And maybe we're just better living with a little illusion that we've built up around ourselves to keep us happy. But yeah, that book with Barry, Barry obviously gave you chapter and verse on this thing, but Barry and I thoroughly enjoyed writing that book. But the thing is, I think there's going to be a version 2 going to be coming out at some point, because we've found there's so much stuff we've come across and saying, that should have been the way. Oh yeah, that should have been the way. And I think there's going to be at some point that there will be a version 2 coming out. Because
I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Brian, thanks very much for your time. The Book of Secrets is out now, and also, good luck with your work on the Phenomena magazine.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is there a web address that people can access?
Yes, it is. www, all the W's, phenomenamagazine.co.uk, Phenomena Magazine, all one word, .co.uk. That'll take you to the website. There's 10 years worth of stuff on the website. It's 100% free. Download any of it, all of it. Just download what you like, and it's all free. And there's some really good stuff in there, as you know yourself, because you've had a look at the magazine.
Yeah, fantastic. Brian, thank you.
Thank you. God bless. Take care, man.
Brian Allan joining us today.